Oh, I splashed.
That was a
I got
full pop. That was a very dense sound.
yeah.
Kind of beer was that?
It is a West Sixth Amber Ale, so tasty
Mm,
little concoction, but it
good
did
choice.
spill on my invader pad. That's all right. Anyway, uh,
Hey, at least it's
what
not on my laptop like's happened before.
exactly. Well, we're back, Mike.
I know. We're actually finally kind of back on to an every 2 week kind of cadence for this thing. We've been pretty inconsistent recently, but I think things have calmed down. I'm done with school. Hopefully, get this thing back on a more regular schedule. Today's guest is one Evan and I know very, very well. We both marched with him for more than one season apiece. We'll introduce him in a second, but before we do, welcome everyone to the Aged Out podcast. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me is
Evan Worrell.
And make sure to hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Spotify, Facebook, Instagram. Everything is just Aged Out Podcast, as I'm sure most of you probably know by now if you're a consistent listener. And in case you didn't listen to the complete previous episode to this, we are looking for a graphic designer to hook us up, which we are willing to pay for, with a new logo.
We got a couple options though, right?
Well, the more options, the better.
All right.
I figure I'll throw it out there. Just an update on iTunes. We need a new logo before we can apply to get on the iTunes podcast library. The current logo we have is not a high enough resolution. So if you know someone that can help us out, or you can, just reach out to us. Evan, you want to take it from here and we'll get going?
Absolutely. So yeah, as Mike already stated, we have a good friend of ours joining us today via Skype video or audio call, which is the easiest way for us all to get together because most of our friends in the drumming community live elsewhere along the country. But we have Travis Peterman joining us tonight. What's up, Travis?
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Anytime, man. Anytime. It's been long overdue to get you on here. I know our schedules are kind of hectic trying to coordinate, especially during the week time. Is it cold up there in the Northeast?
Yeah, it snowed yesterday. We keep having this thing where it's calling for 6 to 8 inches of snow, and it snows for a little bit and then rains and it's gone and it's 60 degrees the next day. So I don't know what's going on.
Sounds like Kentucky.
Yeah, it's great for the sinuses and the allergies. It was 60 or 70 last week, and then today it was like a high of 29. It's ridiculous.
Over the weekend, I think the high was like 21 or 19 one day.
I was telling my wife earlier, I'm just tired of walking outside and experiencing that immediate, like, brisk, cold wind chill hits you, and your body just kind of, like, tenses up, and you get, like, rigid, and you're just like, oh, this is miserable. I would much rather just walk outside in some shorts and a T-shirt. Make it much easier when I'm going anywhere, especially to the gym. But I just got back from the gym. I walked out. I was like sweating, and it's super cold. And the cold air hits your sweat, and you're like, yeah, I'm definitely going to get sick now.
Cold sweat's the worst. Cold sweat is never a good time.
So before we started recording, Travis said you're doing the Insanity. How far into it are you?
I am like 3 days from being halfway through. So they give you 1 month of like the introductory workouts, and then you do a recovery week. And then there's another month of, I guess, what is harder, more intense workouts. So I'm almost halfway there with that.
Pushing to the end, man.
Yeah.
You did a feat this summer that I will probably never do in my life, mostly because I can't see myself wanting to do it at this point. But you ran all summer this past year in 2018 and ended up capping off the summer with how far?
I lost about 40 pounds last summer.
How far did you run? Well, yeah.
6 miles. 6 miles.
Every day?
No, that was like the last run, like finals day during lunch. I did 6 miles, and me and Dan were doing it for most of it, and he capped off at like 5. Like he kind of fizzled out over the last week, and I kept going and got up to a 6 mile run at the end, which is way farther than I'd ever run before that, for sure.
Yeah, I've only ever topped out at like a 5K, and I felt like I was going to die at the end of that. Obviously, you worked up to it, but do you think you'll probably do that again this summer? Or
yeah,
try to?
That is the plan. Yeah, I'm scheduled to finish this the Insanity thing right around Dayton for finals. And then, I'm going to hit the gym for like the 3 weeks in between that and spring training. And then it's time to run again for sure.
I feel like that's the ultimate way that you can hold your kids accountable for their like pre-spring training workouts. Everybody tells their kids like, oh, you guys got to work out, start running or start lifting, doing core strength. I'm doing it too, so you guys better show up in better shape because you're the ones that have to run around.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's at Crown especially, we have like the whole battery staff. Pretty much everybody is in really good physical shape. We didn't do that on purpose, obviously, but it is. You're right. I mean, it's easier to hold them accountable when we're doing it as well, for sure.
Resume for teaching Crown: must work out.
Must run 7-minute mile. Can do 10 pull-ups in a row and 30 push-ups.
Jeez, that'd be wonderful. But anyway, we'll kind of get into some content here. I think Travis has a pretty unique background coming from the Northeast, East Coast. So he can kind of give us a synopsis through that, I guess, just kind of how you got started, maybe some people that inspired you along the way, how you kind of got from one thing into the other, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. Okay. I'll give like the semi-quick version. I feel like I started like anybody else would. I was, playing in elementary school and just kind of doing the concert band thing and orchestra and whatever. And got into marching band after, like, to be completely honest, I saw the movie Drumline when I was in 8th grade, and that came out like at exactly the perfect time to
love it.
Yeah, to make the decision to like, all right, I'm going to join my high school's drumline next year, and like it's going to be exactly like this movie, which of course it wasn't. But started doing the high school thing, and in 10th grade, we actually had this kid Jermaine transfer from another school, and he introduced a bunch of us to drill team up here in like the Philly, New Jersey, Delaware area, and pretty much my whole school's drumline got involved in that. With a group called Imperial Dynasty, which has now evolved all the way from a drill team, which started in 2003, to what is now a independent open WGI group that I'm still involved with. So I think that's a really cool story in its own that Devin Fletcher is the director. He's been with them the whole time, and he's just kind of evolved it into that. But when I was there, I was marching, and it was a drill team. And just kind of watching YouTube videos or whatever people watched videos on the internet with in like 2005. I don't remember if it even was YouTube. But just seeing drum corps videos, and I got cut from the Reading Buccaneers in 2008. And then I kind of got my first start marching on that level with United Percussion in 2009. Went from there, got a call from Josh Brickey, who, of course, we all know, to do the Rhythm X thing in 2011. It's surprising. I don't know how it is still now. I haven't been around there in a while, but I remember being shocked at like the low quantity of people who would audition at Rhythm X. And I said quantity, right? Not quality. Low quantity.
Yeah, you said quantity.
Okay.
You said quantity, yes.
Yeah, low quantity. I mean, so they were at the point where they're calling people like that. Mike, I think actually you might have been somebody that recommended for him to call me, actually. So thank you.
If I remember right, I think I was. I think he called you, and I think I called you too.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty sure you and T-Gas, who I had both marched with before. So yeah, again, thank you for that. That was obviously an awesome experience that I still draw from in what I do today, especially indoors. And then the teaching thing, I aged out in Rhythm X 2012. I was one of those people that was kind of devastated to be done, and I always wanted to keep marching. And like I wasn't studying music in school, but I knew I always kind of wanted to be involved with it. And I was moving back from Ohio to Delaware after that season, and I had just happened to I had sent a couple emails out, put some feelers out for like the DCA circuit out here, and I got really lucky in that the original snare tech of the Cadets 2 had taken a real life job in California and was moving. So I got I got to go right into that when I moved back in June, and I did most of the summer with them. And that has kind of led to really everything else. Honestly, the C2 thing is definitely how, I don't know if we want to make this a separate conversation, how CWP started. I know that was one of your prompts, but maybe this is a good time.
Yeah.
Stop monologuing about that.
No, it's good. It's good. We'll get into this too, but we'll backtrack and kind of define like the transition from drill team for Imperial Dynasty on that and stuff too, and just like what exactly that was versus what it is now. Just to kind of hit on the Rhythm X thing, I was always a little bit surprised about that too. You were talking about like the quantity, and I think that a lot of that has to do with like the recruiting aspect of indoor. I think a lot of groups, especially independent world groups, do a lot of recruiting over the summer and the fall, calling people to get people to come out. And I'm not sure that people maybe get turned away from auditioning, but a lot of times, and I would never discourage anyone from auditioning anywhere that they want to go, like go check it out. It will only help you in the future, especially if you have multiple years left to audition. I'll just throw it out there. But they do have a lot of like recruiting within the members themselves. That's how I got asked to go to Rhythm X the first year. Somebody asked me who was a current member, hey, you should come check this out and come do it. And I was like, okay. I didn't even really know what I was getting into. And that's kind of how we did it afterwards. We called up people like you and Dan and whoever else that happened. So I think that the quantity is actually a lot lower than people would imagine, especially if somebody has gone to a drum corps camp and compared to the numbers that come out to some of those.
Yeah.
So
it definitely surprised me when I got to the audition in 2011, because I just went to Moorhead with him, and he knew I'd marched for the Blue Stars the summer before, and he was like, man, just come up and hang out. Even if you don't make it, it'll be fun. And I had no intention of making it. I wasn't going to march indoor ever again after my 2010 season at Tate's Creek, and it just wasn't really my thing. So I went, no pressure on myself, and got there, and we started playing, and I was like, there's not really that many drum corps guys here right now. This is weird. And then one thing led to another, and that was it.
Yes, sir. Yep.
So, and you talked about, I guess this will be a good segue from your marching member experience, which I can't say that I didn't have the same, I guess, reaction to being done as you. I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm good. I'm ready to go. But you got into the teaching realm, and you said that it kind of happened a perfect storm of situations. The guy who was at C2 went away, and then you got in there. Who else was there at C2 at the time when you got in? What year was that, and who else were you kind of like teaching with?
Sure. So this was the summer of 2012. This was the first year that corps had ever existed. So Rich Hammond was the director, who is also like, he's still a huge mentor of mine. We text about the Sixers all the time. We're always talking basketball, and he's
the process
guy, judge. Yeah, exactly. TTP, baby. But no, he was the director. Dave Dumont was the percussion caption head, and I was teaching there with Andrew Rubano, Amanda Zay, Joe Bergen was the bass tech that first year. Andrew Montero was a pit technician who I still work with very closely at DMU and Bush right now. So I'm pretty much all those people I'm still in contact with, which is awesome. So it was a very like formative experience for me in a lot of ways.
Awesome. And then you stayed at C2 how many years?
3 years. I did 12, 13, and 14 there. And in 2013 is the year that Tom Unks designed the book for them. 12 and 14, the sandwich years of that, it was Colin. And the year Tom Unks was there, he, I had met him at the Blue Stars, obviously, with you, Mike. And so I kind of had a somewhat of a history with him, and at least enough to kind of start a dialogue. And I was I was pretty aggressive about letting him know that I was looking to teach DCI if he ever got back into it, because at that point he was not at the Blue Stars anymore, and he was kind of just a free agent, obviously after doing almost 30 years with the Cadets. So when he went back to Crown in 2015, he called me to do the snare tech thing, and that is when I made the jump from DCA to DCI.
Was that the only summer he was at Crown?
No, he was at Crown 15 and 16. 2 years.
I completely forgot that he was there at all until you just said that. I had completely forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah. What show was 15? That was was that the Inferno show?
Inferno, yeah.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, it was funny because you could always tell the, I guess, influences in the writing between like Tom Hannum and Tom Monks. Like, oh, this is a Tom Monks section.
Yeah. We would joke about that too. Yeah. Yep.
But that's awesome. Obviously, you said you and Mike were exposed and met Tom Ongst from Blue Stars, was he, I guess, I know I've heard you and Tom always say how, or you and Mike say how Tom Monks was always just like out there in the trenches at Blue Stars with you guys, just grinding it like with everybody else. Was he as hands-on at C2 or a little bit more in and out?
C2, he only came in at the end. I feel like, what was that? That was 2013. I feel like he was doing some time with the cadets. Like he definitely wasn't full time with us, but he was there like the last 3 weekends, and he was great. Yeah, like I mean, he was out there teaching, and the kids were very positively impacted by his presence for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I've told Evan that the blocks we always knew we were going to get our butts whooped is if Tom came out to battery sectionals and his shirt came off.
Shirt off, yeah. No,
he took his shirt off. The techs just threw a tennis ball back and forth, and we were just like, all right, here we go.
Reset, out of set.
Yes, sir.
Again.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so then when he made the jump to Crown, did he reach out to you to come fill that spot? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah, he called me September 2nd, 2014. I will never forget that voicemail ever.
You missed the call? Oh, no.
Yeah, I missed the call. And the voicemail was like, he didn't outright say it, but he was talking about an opportunity in DCI. And I had already heard at that point that he was going to Crown. So, I'm jumping up and down, obviously, because, dude, to be honest, like Crown was always my favorite drum corps. I was literally too scared to go there for my age out because I thought I was running the risk of not marching DCI by trying to go right from Bucks to Crown. So I didn't. I went to Blue Stars, and obviously I'm very grateful for that choice because I wouldn't have met Tom, so it's kind of funny how things worked out because here I am working at the corps that I was afraid to audition for.
It's like
and
the
then, of
butterfly
course,
effect.
And of course but on the flip side, you wouldn't have had to deal with my green butt the entire summer.
Oh man, it's all good.
Was that 2010 though? You would have had to deal with me. I would have been your center.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? Who knows how that would have worked out? I literally might not have made it. I have no idea.
You probably would have made it.
Yeah, Travis, I don't know if I've ever apologized. I'm sorry about that summer.
Dude, you don't have to apologize. You were fine. We were all kids, man. Like
you figured it out.
I've told Evan so many times that all 9 of us were bad at playing snare drum when we came to spring training. Like in retrospect,
you may have had to apologize if you did end up marching inside him, though.
That almost happened. Do you remember Pete Sappinen and Joel kept arguing about that?
Yeah, I do remember that. That was
whenever Pete, because Pete Sappinen was around for the camp season. Whenever he was in front of us before the snare line was like officially set, he would switch Travis and I and put me inside of him. And then when Joel would come around, he'd flip us back every single time. I mean, it was the right call. I was very inexperienced. Travis was much farther along in his drumming career. I think Pete Sappinen just liked that I could grid a lot of stuff.
I was literally about to say, like, I didn't know how to grid anything. I couldn't play any sprees. I was just like, oh, I can play in the sound and, like, my chops are good enough. But I see what Pete saw for sure. Like, you had that setup and, like, again.
More vocabulary.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah. That's funny. All right, we're jumping around, which I love to do. I love those segue and those like pathway moments. But you're at Crown, you get the call, you calling Tom back, like trying to keep your cool, like, hey Tom, what's up? I got your voicemail. How's it going, man? So he brings you in, decides you're gonna be the snare tech at Crown for 2015, which, looking back now for me as an alumni, I can clearly see an evolution of the percussion section as a whole starting its uptick. Not that it was ever bad, but if I'm just going to be honest, it wasn't.
There were some down years.
It was kind of like sitting. It was kind of like plateauing. It wasn't going anywhere. It was being stagnant. I'll say that. That's the best way I say that.
I've always thought that it was, they kind of got viewed unfairly because, the brass is winning and the core is pushing at winning. The guard was amazing, and it's like, okay, well, because we don't have a top 2, top 3 drum line, like, oh, they must suck. You know what I mean? And I feel like they got a really bad rap for that when in reality, I mean, I agree with you. I think there were still some great percussion sections going on there. They're just competing in a world where there was just a bunch of other stuff. I still think it's like that. I think there's a lot more good percussion sections that are like really competing to be top 3, top 5 than there are top 3, top 5 horn lines, top 3, top 5 color guards, and that's obviously no offense to those sections. I just think that our activity has kind of evolved in that way where it's more competitive at that top level.
I'd agree with that statement. I think that's pretty accurate.
And those years kind of in there, 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, there was some like changeover staff members, techs. There's a lot of things happening.
Yeah.
But so now you're at Crown, 15 snare tech, 16, 17, 18. You've been there the last 4 years, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 4 years. How did your evolution there kind of evolve, or your roles and titles or positions, whatever, kind of change hands?
Sure. So, yeah, like you said, I was brought in as a snare tech, and back then it was a tight team. It was only 4 of us that were there pretty much the whole summer. It was me, it was Sean Mack teaching the basses, it was Paul Winterhalter teaching the quads, and Zach Schlicker was like the, kind of battery coordinator, like choreographer, like more big picture, doing percons when, Tom Unks or Tom Hannum wasn't there. So, I mean, it was really small. So, there were opportunities to where there were blocks where I was running the drum line or whatever. It was fluid. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, in something like that, you don't get as wrapped up in like the titles or whatever. But we did that for 15. 16 was pretty much the same deal. If I remember correctly, I think we just traded, Paul, and he took the Yamaha gig, so he stopped teaching drum corps after 15. And Andrew Rubano came in and was the quad tech. And other than that, I'm pretty sure it was just the same team. And then obviously 16 to 17 is where the bigger change was when Tom Unks went back to Cadets. And then that left, obviously, the Crown thing open. And I'll always be grateful to Jim Coates and the kind of the upper level design manager guys there that, their Crown is really about promoting from within. Like they always look to do that first before, doing like a big search or like going and grabbing like the next big name that's available. You know what I mean? They kind of looked from within, and I was able to kind of slide into the caption head role for 17 and, now to where it's still. So things definitely got more interesting then. I started working a lot more closely with Tom Hannum, who has grown to be honestly like a second father to me. Like he's such a huge influence in my life, not only in the activity, but just with how you operate. Like he always says, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So I'm
good.
Very grateful for that connection for sure.
That's awesome.
It's really cool that you say Crown does it like that when they need to find a new caption head or whatever position they're filling, because that's the only way you get new blood in the activity. Like, and at some point, there's only a finite number of people with caption head experience that can run a program, and the only way it grows is if you give people a shot. People that have a promising background and experience and knowledge they bring to the table. It's how you prevent things from happening. Like, obviously, I think it's Phantom and the Scouts basically just traded staff going into this coming summer, and we'll see if that works out. That's a topic for a different day, but I think it's great to give new people, younger people, their shot. And so far, I think you've done a great job with it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to use the analogy. It's just like in sports, like somebody's like, oh, we're searching for a new head coach. Well, do you just try to like pay the currently retired guy to come insert, or like the Phil Jackson or something, and hope that works out because they have just this great resume? Or do you bring in somebody that you think will do a great job that maybe doesn't have the resume, but they have the right drive, mindset, knowledge, and see where it goes to possibly set yourself up for the next 20 years versus like you're renting like a Phil Jackson type person. I think kind of like the Celtics, not to get all sports on everybody, but did that when they hired Brad Stevens. Like, well, we could probably get somebody else, some legendary coach, but we're going to see this young blood, as Mike said, in the game here.
Yeah. Yep. No, and it takes foresight, and it takes some balls to do that. Honestly, I'm not really even talking about my thing specifically, but just in general to do what you guys are talking about. I think that it really takes like a vision and confidence in the part of whoever is making that decision to kind of at least strongly believe that that is going to be the best situation for your group, because it's not always going out and getting that big name, because that big name, while they've obviously done things to become the big name, they aren't always the best fit for your specific situation, you know?
Absolutely. Before we get too much, I guess, into like present day, current day, we'll do a little bit of a backtrack. So you've been at Crown, and then during your time at Crown, you also get involved with CWP, RIP, Cadets Winter Percussion, right? So what year did that all kind of start up?
So CWP, there was actually a little bit of crossover with C2, which is, I mean, definitely how I ended up in the position I did. So now that you ask, I'm really not sure. I don't remember like the first conversations about this starting, but I do remember that the first, they tried to get Tom Monks to do it. They tried to get Colin to do it. And then Johnny Trujillo, who is the guy at Bucks right now, he was actually the original, program guy, battery designer at CWP. And that ended up falling through because of some endorsement stuff, which is, and the farther I get into this, the more I realize that like these groups are really heavily tied in with their sponsors, and they don't want to make hires like that to like prolific positions that are going to be kind of crossing that bridge, if that makes sense. So I believe he was an IP artist, and YEA is very Vic Firth, and they have a very deep relationship with them. So Johnny was only there for, I want to say, like 3 or 4 weeks, and we actually I was hired originally to just be like the battery coordinator or whatever. I was just going to teach a drum line. I wasn't supposed to write. I wasn't supposed to do any of the stuff I ended up doing. And we actually had the first design meeting ever for CWP was me, Rich, and Johnny, and that was it. I forget. I don't know, like, again, what happened with George and him and how that went down, but it just kind of fell to me. That definitely wasn't the plan. There was definitely the sense from the beginning that it was kind of created to be like a feeder, obviously, as it should be, like C2's feeding the cadets, and now they want an indoor line that's also going to feed the cadets. And it just kind of blew up into something that was successful on its own, kind of unexpectedly, I would say.
Yeah, started out in open. What year was that, 2016?
14.
14? Oh, wow, I was way off. Samsonite. Swami Samsonite. So 14 started out open class. You guys won first year out.
Yeah.
Is that the first book you've written for like on that scale, I guess, of organization?
Absolutely. So the year before that, actually, so Imperial Dynasty, to circle back now, had come back out. 2013 was the first year they participated in WGI, and it was an A class. And I did the program. I wasn't hired to do this. I was supposed to just help teach the snares, and the way things fell, like I ended up doing a lot more. I ended up kind of rewriting the book, and Andrew Montero came in and like rewrote the pit book, and we ended up going out to Dayton and making finals in A class, which is, I personally think that's really hard to do. There were 30 groups, and we were in the top 15 or 12. We ended up in 9th. I forget how many they take to finals at that point, but that was tough. So I kind of had that initial experience of like what it's like to create an independent indoor show. But yeah, CWP was the first open class show for sure. And it was interesting because we didn't have any competition at all that season until prelims day in Dayton. So we had literally no idea what was about to happen. Like, we didn't know if we were good. We didn't know if we were about to get stomped. It was a total question.
Yeah, that seems like such a handicap for the East Coast groups that compete in WGI, because the Midwest is fairly saturated with a handful of very high caliber groups, and then obviously the West Coast is very saturated. In the East Coast, it's like, well, we're just going to kind of sit over here and do our thing, and then wait till we all get to Dayton and see how the chips fall.
Yeah, we're over here in our tiny gyms working it out. Yeah,
the gyms are tiny everywhere, but well, unless you're maybe in like Florida, Texas, and California, you can play outside.
Yeah, well, I mean, I forget who said this. At some point, we were on tour. I think it was Ron Harden, actually, who was the Vish caption head at Crown, my first 4 years there, and he was just talking about how like the East Coast schools are literally smaller because they're older. Like, they were built years before like all this the new ones in like Texas and Cali and even Ohio with some of the new schools and whatnot. They're literally smaller. It's funny.
It's a good point.
And that's one of the things that shocked me being on tour when you get to Texas, and the schools aren't small in Louisville or Kentucky, but nothing like the schools are in Texas. Like the facilities, the size, all of it.
Yep.
It's crazy, man. CWP, first year out, open class, gold medalist.
Yeah.
Next year, made the jump, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Made the jump to world. So that was 2015. What show was that?
That was Deconstructed.
That's probably all right. Pause. I was recently talking to Dan Shack. It was a completely different topic, but I was talking about CWP, and I was like, we're just talking about creativity and innovation in the activity, and as far as that goes, and it's really hard to do for anyone to just design something that you feel like you've never seen or is an original idea or super creative. And that show is one that does stick out to me where I was like, man, that is really cool. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do that to that extent, I guess, as far as the show design and the deconstructed and the drums and the skeletons and all that stuff as far as the hardware. So yeah. I really like that show, but continue.
Thank you. That was that was crazy too. It was another one of those instances where we really didn't know how we were going to do. And there were a ton of growing pains administratively from, going from an open class group, really going from nothing to an open class group to a world class group where, just it increases the amount of pressure and kind of stress that everyone is going through to kind of make it happen on just a different level. But it was a really unique kind of cast of designers that year. Like Mark Sylvester was hugely influential. Like it was his idea to use the fridge. And he obviously did a large part of the drill that year too. He designed the uniforms. It was actually Andrew Montero's idea, for the concept rather, which I just look back and I think it's like a perfect concept. You know what I mean? And a better, probably no offense to the members or staff of this group, but probably a better group could have won with that concept. If we had a little more, knowledge of the activity. I was like 25, 24 years old. We were all kind of around the same age. So I think that concept is just so obvious. You know what I mean? We knew what the end was going to be from the beginning. Like, oh, deconstructed. Okay, we have to take everything apart, and we're going to end with everything taken apart. It's like very obvious, and then you just have to go through and make like the most interesting vertical moments and events that you can. So we happened across some pretty fortunate ideas that year, I would say.
And you guys made finals, correct?
Yeah, we were sixth. We got sixth.
Sixth place, PIW, first year in finals.
First year.
That's pretty remarkable. And that's pretty unique scenario, too. Obviously, you guys are Cadets winner percussion. You're talking about pressure of feeling like you also have to be respectable and compete at a high level because you're also tied to this organization with such a historic rate of success in its own activity.
Yeah. Yep. But that was definitely a unique kind of detail of things. Like it was weird for us because we didn't have anybody on staff, at least at the higher levels, that even marched or taught cadets. Like it was very disconnected in that way. Really until the third year, the final year, where Jeff Sacktig came on board and we started to have a better relationship with like the actual cadets percussion staff, like Colin and all those guys. We, because at first, and I totally get it, like it was an inconvenience those first 2 years. Like kids were missing cadets camps to go march indoor with us, and they didn't love that. And again, I get that, and it just wasn't set up to totally be cohesive. Not for lack of effort, it just wasn't really happening. And then it finally started to hit a stride and everybody was like getting along, and then it went away.
Went away. Well, it was just kind of from the outside looking in, and this may all be completely wrong, but you guys had obviously been doing a great job as instructors, working with CWP, developing relationship with these kids. But like you said, most of you guys are not teaching at Cadets. You obviously are still with your timeline at Crown. So and the outdoor indoor thing has a big influence. Like, oh, I know these people that teach me an indoor. I'm going to go audition for their outdoor group. So that's probably obviously a strain where you have cadets, winter percussion kids like, no, I'm not marching cadets. I'm going to go march crown or something to that effect. And they're like, this isn't doing what we designed it to do.
Yes. Well, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head. I would say that was, there's probably a list of like 8 to 10 really big reasons why CWP folded when it did. And that was one of the bigger ones for sure, was that, we were now working at Crown, or at least me and a couple other people. And there was starting to be like a pretty even split at that point between who was at Crown and who was at Cadets. And, we didn't put any pressure on them. At least, I don't remember there being any pressure put on like the members to decide either way. They were kind of just doing what they wanted to do. And, as a program that was created as a feeder for a specific organization, I can definitely see how that, that rubs some people the wrong way. I get that.
Now, Evan touched on this, and what we were just talking about with the whole idea of, oh, this person teaches me an indoor, so I'm going to go march for them in outdoor. Obviously, you help run George Mason, and you're the caption head at Crown at this point. Does that marriage, I guess, feed the growth of those two groups? Because I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a lot of kids that do George Mason that also incidentally march Crown.
Yep.
So that's got to help both groups, just from a consistency of instruction and playing with each other year-round standpoint.
Yeah, I think it absolutely does, and we're aiming for it to extend even further. Like the last 2.5, 3 years, it's been this like kind of quadrant of like a Crown, George Mason, and then ID on the open class level and the Bushwhackers on the DCA level, where we've kind of utilized the ID and Bush as like I'm not trying to take away from the identity of these groups. They're not feeder corps by any means. There's no like specific relationship of the organizations, but percussively they certainly have been a great place for like, oh, like the last cut at Crown is going to go march Bush for a summer and come back to Crown next year and make it. You know what I mean? We've had a ton of kids. I would say more tangibly, probably 15 or 20 kids that have used it directionally like that and started, because those staffs are people that have aged out at Crown or that have aged out of CWP or whatever we've taught together at some point. And so it is like kind of a community out here. Like for the first time this fall, we had a mass phone call with the staffs of all those groups to talk about just approach to teaching and approach to the instrument and et cetera. And I think it's definitely paying dividends like you're talking about. So for right now, that's very battery heavy, very battery focused. We're kind of trying to get the pit more involved in that as well. We've had a harder time finding staff members that are like kind of able to do multiple groups and be involved in that kind of community. But that's definitely been the plan, and we've seen it pay off. Even at Bush too. Like, I mean, when we went there in 2016, they had not made DCA finals the year before that, and then this past year they got, I believe, third in drums, something like that. So I think it's helping all of the groups. Honestly, that's the goal, at least.
To have a setup like that and be able to capitalize on it and see all the groups involved flourish is just huge.
Yeah, it's definitely a long-term game for sure. So we've seen some success and there's been some trials and tribulations with it and some toes stepped on, and we're trying to work out the kinks so that, as many people as possible can benefit from it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about egos. It's not about anything like that. It's about like increasing the level of education and the level of competitiveness of this area. To me, that's really high on my priority list.
Well, and I think too, it also is doing the kids a great benefit because you're giving them better tools to get the outcome that they ultimately want to. Like, obviously, like you said, you're not using Bushwhackers in ID or GMUs like feeder programs per se, but they are tools for kids to get more experience, more knowledge, more in-depth instruction that would definitely help them. I mean, anyone would be foolish to ignore that the Blue Devils have done that for years. They literally call them BDB, BDC, and the happy marriage of RCC and the connection that has had over the years. So, I mean, it's clear that the model works.
Yeah, I think Southern California is a great example of that. Even the schools, like on the scholastic level and SCPA, the circuit out there, like I had the great opportunity to go judge a show for them a couple of winters ago, and it's awesome, man. Like those guys they all respect each other to the point where they learn from each other, you know, and I think that's definitely not something that happens a lot where I live. I think it's more of a it's kind of like a cold shoulder kind of thing with a lot of this community up here, and I definitely think that we would be wise to kind of learn from their example for sure.
Well, to me, you might be, with your all set up on the East Coast with these groups that we've been talking about, might be the first people to have actually successfully done some kind of thing like that after the Blue Devils have done it in what we just talked about. And to me, it seems like it's a hard setup to make work because it requires consistency of staff and techs. And with the way everything is structured financially and everything, I know from other people that I know that have taught and are teaching that it's hard to get people to stick around for 5 years in a row just because life costs money and there's not a whole lot of it in the teaching of the activity. And so I think that's a big reason why you all might be the first one that have been able to pull it off since BD.
Sure. Yeah.
Well,
it's definitely
I'm going to jump in. I don't think they're the first one since BD, but I think they're probably the more longer sustaining. I think there definitely was a happy marriage between Blue Coats and Rhythm X for a few years.
Oh, fair enough.
When Tim Jackson was teaching both and Tim Fairbanks was teaching both and stuff. But
I think those examples are smaller scale, though.
They're smaller scale. I was going to say they're a shorter lifespan because Tim doesn't teach in the summer because he does a multitude of other things, and Fairbanks is writing drill for everybody.
1,000 groups.
Well, he writes for a handful of groups, but yeah. Anyway, but GMU I think has been much more of a larger sample size that has worked. So I'll just kind of caveat off of that. But
yeah, I mean, right now I think it's most of the section leaders are the same at those two groups right now too, which is awesome. I mean, the students that have really bought in and thrived here are just like 11 out of 10, honestly.
That's what you want.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
So currently, I guess present day, your title at GMU is your title at Crown is your title at Imperial Dynasty, and then are you writing for anybody DCA? Just like what all you got going on?
Yeah, so I'm actually the director at GMU. So I have to deal with a lot of the admin stuff, which is tough because I don't live down there. I live like 2 hours away in Delaware. So it's a lot of like email, and we do like Friday phone calls with the office down there. Like so GMU is actually technically an athletic band, I believe they would consider it. So they have like the pep band, and then they have a color guard and a couple of other ensembles, and it just has worked out because the director of athletics bands down there. His name's Doc Nix. He's a pretty big local celebrity there. Actually, he has there's like the restaurant across the street has a menu item named after him, and he's like a big personality when he runs the pep band, and it's definitely garnered them a pretty big following, both in like the pep band world and just locally in general. And that's kind of where we've been able to have offshoots such as the color guard, such as the drumline, and we exist kind of in that medium with them, where we are run literally through the university as like a oh man, I don't know what you would call it.
Extracurricular activity.
Yeah, exactly. Extracurricular activity. And you don't have to be a student there, although that is their goal to like ultimately try to recruit as many people as possible to be students and go to George Mason, which I think is awesome, you know, higher education and et cetera. So that's what I do there. At Imperial Dynasty right now, I'm just writing the battery book and writing the drill, and I'm also on the advisory board there. So I talk with the director about any tough decisions he's looking to make or advice or whatever. Unfortunately, I'm not able to get in there that much because I do have to be at GMU. At the Bushwhackers, I write the battery book. I'm just on the design team there, and I consult with the caption head, who is the guy who marched CWP, marched George Mason the first year we were there. So kind of came up through our program and has, like, obviously demonstrated the ability and the desire to kind of manage on that level. So they're really taking off there. But I don't do much more than consult and just write for them. And I took on the Raiders arranging gig this year, so DCI open class as well.
Nice.
Haven't gotten too deep in with them yet, so I'm just kind of feeling it out, but definitely excited about what's going on there. Yeah, that's pretty much it right now. I mean, that's my life. It's a lot of emails, a lot of organization, Google Sheets, Slack, Dropbox, keeping things in order and making phone calls. And yeah, it's nice. I get to make my own hours. I wake up at like noon out, and then I'll usually work pretty consistently from like 4 p.m. to, I don't know, sometimes 1, 2 in the morning. I'm messing around with stuff. So it's cool. I dig it.
You're doing band, man.
Yep.
Yeah. Band to band.
Full-time band.
I know, man. That was definitely not always the plan.
I was getting ready to ask you, is this where you wanted to end up? Like, since you were marching, did you always feel like, I want to be a top dog somewhere, I want to run a successful program, or did it kind of just, the pieces just slowly kind of fell into place?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably be lying if I didn't like want those things, but I would definitely be lying if I said I knew how to make it happen or that I had a plan to have a career in this. Like, I went to school for almost 11 years. I was like in and out, and I took my time with some things, and I ended up with an associate's, a bachelor's, and a master's degree, and I'm not directly using any of them. The last being the master's in school counseling, which I was definitely planning to do until I got about halfway through the program, and I realized I had kind of started making enough money doing all the band stuff, and that if I were to actually take a job as a school counselor, I would have to significantly step back from all this stuff. I just wouldn't have time to do it. And I was just like, I'm going to finish. Like, this is my backup plan if anything ever goes wrong. Because I honestly, that weighs on my mind all the time, is that these are not long-term commitments. Like, you don't sign contracts here, beyond like the 1 year. And even those sometimes you don't get.
You mean you don't get the Bryce Harper like 13-year whatever $1 million deal?
It's absurd.
Not at all.
Isn't the last thing I heard that like Major League Baseball's popularity is going down and like TV viewership is in the tank?
Oh yeah,
where are they getting this money?
Yeah,
dude, that blows my mind, these baseball contracts. But anyway,
that's a whole different story.
That's just ironic because you're a big Phillies fan. Aren't you a Phillies fan?
I am not a Phillies fan, actually.
All right, I put that in your mouth then.
No, you're good. I mean, Sixers and Eagles. That's my Philly sports right there. I'm diehard for those guys.
Well, as an Eagles fan, how did they go from Super Bowl champion to not good?
Not
Injuries,
good,
bro.
Okay, they were okay. They weren't. There was a drop off. That's all I'm saying.
Of course. I think there's almost a drop off, man. I mean, unless you're Belichick and the Patriots, it's really hard to repeat. Guys get big contracts because they obviously had good years in a Super Bowl run, and they sign elsewhere, or people just kind of lose track of the goal. Like, we dealt with a lot of injuries, so I think it's hard to repeat. That's why you rarely see it.
Yeah. NFL's tough.
Yeah.
All major sports are tough. But anyway, to kind of, I guess, reiterate what Mike was saying, and we touched on this a little bit before we hit the record button, but I've always just kind of viewed your well-deserved rising through the ranks as you being a student of the game, like just a product of paying attention, being smart, staying focused, being determined, stepping out, taking chances, voicing your desires and strengths, as like kind of how you got from maybe member of group here to caption head, designer, arranger, this and that. You said earlier, like, you probably couldn't tell the recipe to someone for how you do these things. But I would say that none of the three of us were ever, I guess, I don't want to use the word celebrities, but like
Yeah,
super well known.
marching.
I was not the Drew guy of drumming. I wasn't the whoever center snare of whatever place.
Dan Shack, all these guys.
Like, I mean, I was never INE solo champion Chops McGee. Like, that was just not the player I was. I was never that, and I was perfectly fine with that. But I think that obviously you are a beautiful representation of, well, that's not what it's about, really. That's great and all, but really you just got to like be in the right place at the right time and have done the proper preparation to put yourself in the position to take those positions.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with you too that I couldn't tell you the recipe other than, just do really well at the tasks you're given. And I know that's cliche, and that's obviously not like a band specific saying, but if you do well at what you're given, then people have the chance to be impressed by that and kind of promote you when those opportunities come up. And you're absolutely right about right place, right time. I would say, especially with like getting into C2, like I said, when the guy was leaving, and then the CWP thing that just kind of got bounced down until somebody accepted the job that, at that point I had no affiliation. So I wasn't with a different stick and mallet company because I wasn't with any stick and mallet company. So I was like pretty low risk, and then from there you just, I mean, speak up and don't speak up too much. I think that's also how some people dig graves for themselves. It's a game. I don't know if you guys watch Game of Thrones, but I think there are pretty hilarious parallels between, and less fun parallels between like how you make waves in this kind of political spectrum versus how those characters do, for sure.
Who do you think is going to be alive at
it's
the
better
end of the season?
Oh my gosh, we could get on this for hours. But I'm all right.
I don't know, man. I literally
one.
I finished through my second time watching it all. I love that show.
It's so good.
My sister's binge watching it right now, and she's like texting me about episodes. I'm like, you have to watch the next one. There's like, I'm like, the next episode's like one of the biggest plot reveals in the whole show. And she's like, oh my gosh, and it's already like 2 a.m. She's like, all right, I'm starting it.
Oh man.
I think it's going to go down as one of the greatest shows of all time, like ever created.
I agree. I mean, I think it is, although the last season they can certainly mess it up. Like,
how many times have we seen that? Lost, Dexter.
Yeah.
All those shows.
I haven't seen either of those shows, so I'm all right. But what was it? We saw an announcement on Twitter earlier. Mike and I are in this group chat, but we're getting completely derailed, but that's all right.
Who cares?
It was like the Battle of like Winterfell episode is supposedly in episode 3 of this last season. It's supposed to be the longest shot like battle scene in cinematography history or something like that.
Oh boy.
The longest before it was the Helm's Deep Siege in the second Lord of the Rings movie, and apparently this one's longer than that.
Dude, it's gonna be nuts.
I'm ready. Super ready. I'm gonna be watching this at spring training.
My body is ready. Captain Marvel comes out in like 3 days, and then we have Game of Thrones season premiere and Avengers Endgame. I'm just like, cancel me for the next like 2 months.
This show is so ridiculous that I have to have a couple wisdom teeth taken out at some point this year, and I'm purposefully making it after the season ends. Wow. So if I die when I'm put under, I'll go out knowing how it ends.
Oh my gosh.
That thought literally crossed my mind.
Your tombstone, but did finish Game of Thrones.
Yes, 100%.
Oh my gosh.
I have to know.
Well,
I have to know.
Man. Well, I don't know where we go from there.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for like 56 minutes. We could just wrap it up if you want.
We could. I mean, I'm sure that we could talk about other stuff for hours and hours. DCI judging and this and that and this and that and this and that. But maybe for another time, we have part 2. We've had Dan Shack on a few times. So
he's been on 3 times.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, that first time we were trying to do both of us at the same time and it didn't work out. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm down.
All
right, so you guys ready to...
Joe.
Oh, man. There was... That snare line in 2012 was such a weird... We had guys in that line from, like, all different spectrums of personality and interests. It
was eclectic.
Yeah, it was a very, very... Yeah, eclectic is the perfect word.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I feel like often you either look back at lines like that and you realize it then, or like there's a lot of hype for a line before it happens and then it's kind of whatever. But I think that snare line is one of those things that was like a big deal in the moment. Like there were those, I remember that stupid SpongeBob meme of like, oh, we're just going to take all the DCI center snares and put them here or whatever it said. And like people were talking about it then. And then like now still people will like make side comments to me about that snare line and that show and whatever. So I think that's like a pretty cool thing that we were.
I think that's a testament for what we were able to accomplish. And I mean,
especially given the circumstances
like
of
any
that
other
season.
group did. So
with the rehearsal space we had to use and the things we had to, the hurdles we had to overcome.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a funny video. It's a very heartfelt video that Mark McCabe, I think was his name, created and put on YouTube, kind of like following us around all season. And Joe talking about like, let's think about all the things we did. First of all, we took 10. Second of all, we rehearsed at Buddies. This is like going through this list of stuff. But I mean, those are the bonds though that, I mean, anybody who marches any group on any level create, I guess, in this activity, the brotherhoods. And I mean, you guys, and we're very fortunate that what we're doing now with this podcast parallels with the great friends that we have, like people who are in positions in this activity now are also just coincidentally like really good friends that we made drumming.
I mean, that was one of the motivations to start this. Like I was at the gym one day and I've been listening to a lot of Joe Rogan's podcast and I was like, how often do kids and younger performers want to hear about people's opinions and experiences and stories they have from when they marched and just their opinions on the activity? And I was like, we could do that because between Evan and I, we have connections all over the activity from when we marched and taught and all that stuff. And it'll be an excuse to get back in touch with really good friends that we had from when we were younger. So it was almost like a no-brainer for us.
Sure. Well, I'm glad you guys are doing it. I definitely appreciate you having me on. I'm always down to talk shop.
For sure, man.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's a pretty good point to close this out on. So thanks everybody for sticking around this long with us on this episode. Again, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Instagram, Facebook once again. The iTunes thing is still in the works. And hopefully we'll just see everybody in 2 weeks.
Peace.